I'd like to welcome everyone back from the break at this time, and we'll get ready for our third and final panel of the day. And I'm going to turn it over to Ellen Fisher, who's our moderator. Ellen is Vice President for Research for the University of New Mexico. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you, Lisa. And I really want to just say I'm pleased to be here with you this afternoon, and I'd like to thank Lisa and the entire planning committee for what has been a very stimulating and informative and lively discussion this all day today, actually. As we switch gears here a little bit, we're going to talk in this last session about a nascent collaborative opportunity for our region. And I'll just start by putting this in some perspective. The last Friday marked the end of the 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference in Glasgow, Scotland. And the COP26 hosted world leaders from both small and large countries and featured an amazing array of advocates for our planet. Also recognized that the global climate emergency climate emergency is affecting people in every region of our world. And so in much of what has been written about the activities of the COP26 and other recent climate efforts, we see recurring themes regarding approaches to addressing climate change. Mitigation represents a key area of emphasis for developed countries who tend to be the major contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, whereas adaptation and resilience have become absolutely critical for people, communities, and businesses to respond to increasingly more frequent and intense climate impacts. So I say this as this is becoming increasingly apparent in our region, in the desert Southwest, where we are facing increasing periods of drought that cause economic disruption and threaten our unique ecosystems, our culture, and our way of life. In short, there will be no New Mexico economy if we can't manage climate change within our state and across our region. This includes developing sustainable agricultural practices, understanding species adaptation in the face of drought, creating mechanisms for reforestation, training the next generation of climate scientists, and more. So one example of how the federal government has at least started to address these issues is through the National Science Foundation's long-term ecological research sites that provide a network of decades-long observation, experimentation, and modeling to understand how the world around us is changing. That network includes 28 sites, and very interestingly, 2 of them are located here in New Mexico, one at Sevilleta and one and Jornada is the other one. So these sites engage thousands of personnel, including investigators, graduate students, undergraduates, and K-12 students in a host of LTER research, education, and outreach activities. What's also so important about these sites is the knowledge gained from these sites. Again, 2 of them are in New Mexico, is transferred to other areas around the world with similar climate adaptation and resilience needs. So today, given the complexity of the issues facing us as a state and a region with respect to climate change, it is imperative that we build strong interdisciplinary teams to develop new and innovative solutions to the growing crisis. So in this last panel, we are going to talk about a new initiative called the Northern Rio Grande Corridor Collaborative, or the NRGCC, which brings together the major research universities within New Mexico. So University of New Mexico, New Mexico Tech, and New Mexico State University, along with the University of Texas at El Paso, Sandia National Laboratory, and Los Alamos National Laboratory. And as an initial focus of the NRGCC, we've been building a diverse cross-institutional interdisciplinary team targeted at Drylands Resilience. So this team aims to establish groundbreaking strategies to quantify and improve the resilience of natural capital for the region through a range of initiatives that include innovative data science, new technologies, and pioneering resilience strategies for land managers, ranchers, and farmers. So with that as a little bit of an introduction, I will introduce our panelists, and then we're going to have a few questions, and I'm going to ask I'm going to direct the questions to one of our panelists, but also allow time for the others to respond. So our 4 panelists for this last panel of the afternoon is Dr. Luis Cifuentes, who's the Vice President for Research at New Mexico State University, Mr. Michael Everhart-Erickson, he's the lead for the Business Development Team at the Feynman Center for Innovation at Los Alamos National Laboratory. Dr. Roberto Osegueda, who's the Vice President for Research at the University of Texas at El Paso, and Dr. Jennifer Rudgers, who's a Regents Professor of Biology and the Director of the Sevilleta Long-Term Ecological Research Program, and she's at the University of New Mexico. So to start us off, I'm going to ask Dr. Rudgers if she will provide a brief overview of the vision for the Center for Drylands Resilience, including the projected benefits to economic development.
Thank you, Ellen, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you today. We have been building a statewide vision for the Center for Dryland Resilience to position New Mexico as the global leader for transformative industries and research and resilience strategies. Resilience is the capacity of a system to withstand threats without losing fundamental structure or function, and to put it in the context of this summit, without losing economic growth. The resilience of businesses and communities to environmental threats, such as droughts, fires, pollution, and climate change, is critical to sustaining productive economies, especially in dryland systems, because they teeter at the edge of critical thresholds for rapid degradation. Disturbances can tip systems into new, potentially undesirable states, as with the transition from pinyon woodlands to shrublands and grasslands, which we're seeing around us here in New Mexico more and more frequently as pinyon trees die from drought and bark beetle outbreaks. All too often, these tipping points are detected only after they occur. But there are ways to detect early warning signals of major transitions and prevent them if you have the rich data and analytical tools to look for them. In 50 to 100 years from now, the climate of Albuquerque is going to match that of El Paso, Texas. Maximizing resilience under this change is arguably the most important thing we can do to preserve and sustain New Mexico's economy and way of life. However, understanding how to maximize the resilience of real systems has lagged behind the large body of existing theory and mathematics on resilience. We have so far lacked the combination of high-resolution data and advanced computational tools that are needed to advance this frontier and apply resilient strategies to the real world. These kinds of actions will catalyze both new industries to promote resilience and help to anticipate and prevent the collapse of existing industries that rely on systems at the brink of tipping points. New Mexico is currently ranked as the #1 most water-stressed state in the US. Globally, usable water is projected to decline for 7% of humans for every 1 degree change Celsius of climate warming. This impact is going to hit our drylands the hardest and first. We need a highly skilled workforce to solve pressing environmental crises that fuel industry jobs and meet federal workforce needs, including international labs. We need support for the state's new climate strategy, with investment in job training, data science, and forecasting models that can help us better anticipate the future. We need to design novel sensor technologies for environmental monitoring and expand statewide networking and communication capabilities so that information on resilience is rapidly and widely distributed. This will enable nimble responses. And we need to pioneer industries to innovate resilient strategies that help land managers to sustain landscapes that support tourism, outdoor recreation, and the film industry, and help ranchers and farmers improve productivity as our climate continues to dry and warm. Altogether, these activities will sustain and grow the state economy in at least 3 important sectors: private technical and scientific services, which are currently at $7.4 billion, outdoor recreation and tourism, and agriculture, which agriculture uses more than 80% of our state's available annual fresh water. We're building integrated activities that fall into 3 basic components. First, a statewide monitoring network that will apply advanced wireless and wired communication technologies to efficiently collect high-frequency data in real time to fill gaps in our knowledge of natural capital, climate change, and system resilience, and better predict when we might be at tipping points. This work includes inventorying carbon across the state and finding ways to make carbon markets equitable. And in the short term, it could set us up for the $550 billion in climate in the Build Back Better Act through grants for states, localities, tribes, and industries to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and mitigate climate change. Second, we will mobilize these data by breaking new ground and bringing together tools from computer science and artificial intelligence with big environmental data on water, carbon, agriculture, tourism, and the economy. New Mexico has a large advantage on this front, with the 2 NSF-funded long-term ecological research sites that Ellen introduced earlier, a hub for data science that includes our national labs, Data One, the Environmental Data Initiative, the Earth Data Analysis Center, and the new New Mexico Water Data Act, and a number of faculty across the state who are working on machine learning, artificial intelligence, and big data science. And the third component is that we will experimentally test and optimize potential resilience improving strategies that can fuel new industries. These innovations include compost additions to maximize productivity and better store carbon and water, technologies that remove pollutants from runoff waters and dairy wastewater, and microbial bioremediation tools. Our center is aimed to position New Mexico as a global leader in businesses, technologies, and scientific innovations that nimbly track and predict threats to resilience, both in New Mexico and in drylands worldwide, and that implement strategies to maximize resilience to environmental perturbations that sustain clean air, water, and food. Thanks, Ellen.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was a great introduction to this effort that we are underway on. And I'm going to now ask Roberto to respond to this question. The current federal reconciliation bill includes $4.28 billion for workforce development in support of climate resilience and mitigation. And the state of New Mexico adopted a new climate strategy in 2020. Given these initiatives, could you speak to the regional potential of a collaborative such as the NRGCC, and how could the NRGCC position itself to lead a major effort in this area?
Thank you, Ellen. I think first of all, I want to thank you for the invitation here at UTEP, being south of New Mexico, but I really appreciate the inclusion for this meeting. First of all, let me talk about the collaborative per se. This is a group of 4 universities, including Navajo College, Navajo Tech, with the great support of Sandia National Labs and Los Alamos. I think among all of us, we have a tremendous expertise and leadership in so many topics, which include climate science, carbon management, clean energy, and water, in addition to what we do on a daily basis, which is the education piece, and of course, workforce development and education. Okay, so together we can advance the knowledge about the climate systems and clean energy, and apply that knowledge through deepening the partnerships and transferring technology that benefit the state of New Mexico and El Paso as well. When I looked at the opportunities that have been passed by the current version of the federal reconciliation bill, the opportunities are simply way too many. Everywhere you look, you'll see agencies that have been added $100 million, $500 million in support to do very specific activities, all of them related to climate science and the environment. Let me give you some examples. For example, in the committee, the Department of Energy, they will be investing close to $1 billion for demonstration project. So if you think about the capabilities or the workforce that will be needed for that particular project, whatever it is, and how they put it in competition, there will be a huge demand for workforce related to climate sciences in the areas that we have mentioned. More examples, there's going to be increased close to $1 billion to support the Office of Science for basic research. EPA, they're going to be receiving $100 million to do research on air pollution. NASA will be receiving funding, for example, to provide climate research and development related activities, observe and mitigate climate change and the impact. So everywhere I look, NOAA, that's another one. Everywhere I look, there are going to be a lot of opportunities for the collaborative to succeed. And what I see is no single institution will have the ability to do it all. These are going to be great opportunities. Collectively, we can accomplish a lot, including in the Drylands initiative. So in summary, I do have a certain concerns about the workforce, quite frankly. I think there's so many challenges right now to be able to produce the workforce that is required to do this sort of projects. So people are talking about doing it through traineeship and apprenticeships, but that's a role that typically is reserved to a community college. But I think we will have an opportunity to support those activities as well. And that's it.
Awesome, thank you. As a kind of a follow-up question to that last question, so Michael, what do you think the role of New Mexico's EDD could or should be with respect to capitalizing on the current unfunded New Mexico climate strategy in a positive way to fuel the economy, and perhaps more broadly, how could the state EDD foster more collaboration around adaptation and resilience?
And just to give everyone a little bit of my background, I'm sitting in for Dr. Nan Sauer, who couldn't make it today. She wanted to, but was unable. And I was asked to step in her place simply because of my station here at Los Alamos in our tech transfer office. So I have a background of having worked at Los Alamos in this capacity for about 16 years now. So much of my input will be based from that perspective. I will say that, I thought these questions were very interesting, and took some time with my team to talk about, what it is that the EDD is doing and what they could be doing to help promote the NRGCC Dryland Resilience initiatives. And it was interesting, after I had read, I worked with my team, I had a list of about 10 suggestions, and each of those suggestions were addressed by the plan that I read that was on the website, the executive plan. And first and foremost, that gave me a lot of heart about the vision that's already been created by EDD, but also the various institutions that are helping to create this initiative. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with you all. I've been here since this morning, and I got to say, there's a lot of great thinkers and individuals who know a great deal about New Mexico's business, climate, and economy. So with that, let's see. So New Mexico Economic Development Department's role to capitalize on the unfunded New Mexico climate strategy. I think first and foremost, the role is to continue to monitor, refine, educate, and drive outcomes in coordination with multiple supporting institutions, such as UNM sponsoring this event today. I think that this is an ongoing discussion, and that's been pointed out by multiple presenters today, that we're all working together now in a way that perhaps we haven't in the past. I've been fairly isolated and insular in my capacity in a tech transition, and really it's in the last 2 or 3 years that there has been a much greater emphasis on transitioning technologies out to the regional marketplace. So we have various teams here at Los Alamos who are dedicated to doing that, and a lot of new programs have erupted since then that have helped bolster companies in their efforts to take technologies out of laboratories and into the marketplace, especially here regionally. The climate initiatives going in place create technology needs and organizational goals that are disruptive and difficult. I'll agree with that. And we believe there will be an ongoing need to connect with the national laboratories and invest in really climate-related technology development. So it's going to be a long-term discussion, and we should have some expected milestones along the way. So I think the question is, how do we make existing and newly developed technologies more readily available and aligned with interest toward that end? And in that way, I agree with Dr. Tuttle's statement that, we are technology rich and, perhaps adoption poor. And, what that means is there's a great deal of opportunity here. There have been recent discussions. Dr. Vanessa Chan from our Office of Technology Transitions visited a few weeks ago, and we had the opportunity to meet with various companies and regional interests and get their perspective on just how the tech transition effort is going where Los Alamos is concerned. And it's been wonderful to see my management's management snap to those questions. And we're all thinking much more critically than we have in the past about how we can develop strategies to transition more technology to the regional marketplace. So my hope is that Los Alamos is going to be ready for initiatives like the NRGCC when it's time to get technologies adopted by industry to help out regionally with those plans and executing on those plans. We believe that there needs to be additional investment and capital available to incentivize and engage New Mexico small businesses in support of the EDD strategy. And I think it's also important, as President Stokes had mentioned, to broaden the discussion on how to do this. And I also think that engaging businesses as a part of the conversation is going to continue to be very important, because their perspective and the skills and expertise that they bring to the conversation, I think, will be important where the NRGCC is concerned. We also think that as a number of stakeholders increase, there will be a continued need to develop consensus on strategy, on how to move forward and incentivize collaboration around a shared vision and shared outcomes. And one thought was, because of the focus on dry lands, on rural lands, it's going to be very important to concentrate on accessible wins and promote those widely to the public audience, and to help make the public feel a part of the collaboration. The conversation around climate change tends to change over the years. Right now, the iron is white hot, and I think it's very appropriate that we're all snapping to this opportunity. And it may be a good time to leverage the developing public understanding of climate change issues.
Thank you. I noticed that there's some questions in the chat that that we'll get to after we do maybe one or two more questions that we had prepped the panel on. So, Michael, I'm sorry, did I cut you off? Were you done?
No, I was about to summarize, but again, just to summarize and complete these thoughts, we believe that the New Mexico EDD Economic Path Forward and the New Mexico Climate Strategy outline a comprehensive approach to meet state and national goals and offsetting and reducing greenhouse gases. So that's a wonderful thing. I wasn't aware of that until having read that plan. The EDD may consider increasing exchange within universities and FFRDCs in and outside of New Mexico in coordination with the industry to learn about new technology approaches, their marketability and deployment potential that might be needed to fill the gaps. And I think the overall message I'd like to give is, the conversation must be kept alive over the years. This needs to be a 5, 10, 15, 20-year plan, and there needs to be a drive towards execution. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so Luis, New Mexico EDD promotes New Mexico as the chili capital of the world, which it is. Now that New Mexico chilies have been grown and eaten by astronauts on the International Space Station, are there ways to promote New Mexico as the chili capital of the world and beyond, and use that to build collaborations between sustainable agricultural and aerospace industries in our region? And this is kind of a fun question, but I love the connection between two of the industries that have been identified by the EDT, sustainable agriculture and aerospace.
Definitely a fun question. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you to the panel for the invitation. So, yeah, chili capital is definitely a well-deserved moniker for New Mexico, and I'd like to say I don't think there's any better food anywhere in the world, and it's all related to chili. And, you know, how we promote it, I think, is a lot about building on what has already been an incredible history and use-inspired research in this domain. So the corridor, the Northern Rio Grande corridor, has really come a long way, and I have to bring up the early 20th century pioneering work of Fabian Garcia here at New Mexico State, who fundamentally laid the foundation for this industry. And then we've come a long way from that into what was now, you know, that famed ISS chili experiment that UNM and New Mexico State have been collaborating on. And by the way, Fabian Garcia was recently inducted into the American Society for Horticultural Science Hall of Fame. We're really proud of that. So from an EDD perspective, biosciences, sustainable value-added agriculture, and aerospace are all part of their key industries. And I think the NRGCC collaborating in these areas, not just about chili, but about food in general, has great economic potential. So I'm not going to say it all. NMSU, we've got Space Grant Office, Apache Point Observatory, UAS test site, and the state-sponsored Center for Excellence in Sustainable Food and Agricultural Systems. UNM, you've got a cross-college team collaboration working on the surface of the moon and Mars. UTEP, you have the Center for Space Exploration and Technology. Long history of working with UAVs, National Labs, White Sands. UTEP, similarly, a lot of added value in this area. And of course, we now have New Mexico Spaceport, opportunities for CubeSats and all of the potential that has for ag remote sensing. And let's not forget the national labs have tremendous capacity in this area. So as an example for the kind of collaboration that could happen and may happen, UNM and NMSU are looking into proposing something that's going to be called the New Mexico Center for Advanced Space Agriculture, which is envisioned as a regional catalyst for space agricultural research. The idea here is to facilitate production of space-ready plant strains that are engineered to flourish in a low microgravity environments and can be adapted to long-term planetary missions. This is great technological development, not just in aerospace, but in life sciences, potential tremendous synergy between NASA and the NRGCC. The NRGCC can collaborate on all areas of digital agriculture. And I think associated with that is a tremendous potential for training associated with data analytics and so forth that our students so desperately need. We have a history of doing a lot of work in space weather. We have extensive capacity in remote sensing and UAVs, and there's a lot of work that can still be done in hyperspectral imaging analysis, not just for chili, but ultimately the kind of analysis and the kind of technology that can be adapted to planetary studies related to food production. Robotic technology is another tremendous area, not just harvesting and monitoring chili peppers, but other crops. Aligned with robotics is all the technology associated with imaging. For example, how do you tell a green chili apart from the background that is green also? One of our faculty, Dr. Stephanie Walker, has often said that this large industry could really be damaged by the fact that we're having trouble finding people to work in it. And so robotics is a big part of that, but associated with that is the creation of particular cultivars of peppers that can absorb the potential damage associated with technology being used to harvest. And so I think that there's a lot of potential for collaborating on genomic breeding and that kind of work done with all of the universities associated with the NRGCC. And then there's also the potential collaboration associated with social science research. I think UNM is doing this kind of work, so is NMSU, I'm sure UTEP. How do you turn the moon and Martian regolith into something in which you can grow a mushroom or some kind of plant? How do you do that? So that, you know, the opportunities just span all kinds of fields and can bring in a tremendous number of scientists, both at the universities and at the national labs. But then we also have to bring in our respective innovation centers, which need to help us commercialize and market this. All of the IP that's going to come out of these research collaborations. These centers are key entrepreneurial development entities in the state that work throughout the state, including rural communities. And they're going to be very supportive, not only in the sciences, but eventually in all of the tourism that is involved, both in the state of New Mexico and potentially in space someday. As an example, I just heard that the Arrowhead Center down here in this part of the state has been talking to a venture capital firm in Houston that is interested in looking at food growing systems in space and are looking to maybe partner with the universities in New Mexico. So for me, the NRGCC, it's going to start with the drylands work, which is fascinating, and which a lot of what I've talked about could be incorporated or as part of that, but it just got unimaginable opportunities. So with that, I'll stop. I could go on forever, but turn it back to the panel.
All right, thank you, Luis. I'm going to go back to Jen, and then I'm going to start opening up the questions. But we had one last question that I wanted to get out there, but I'm going to combine it with some of the chatter that's been in the chat. So Jen, a great deal of the work of your team thus far has been in building innovative strategies to address tipping points in ecosystems and also to develop integrated resilience strategies. Can you provide us with some examples of how that might work within various key sectors, including the agricultural sector, such as within the dairy industry? But then also there have been several questions about the carbon inventory, and I know that's also a key area of interest with respect to the climate change activity and looking at mitigation as well as adaptation.
Yes, thanks for the great question, Ellen. And let me start with some of the resilience strategies to give you some concrete examples of the things we're thinking about. And these really are just 3 examples. I think there's huge potential here and things we haven't even thought of yet. So the first example of an innovative resilience strategy is something called the algal turf scrubber system, developed by our team members at Eastern New Mexico University. And as polluted water from dairy wastes flows across a bed of algae, the algae remove nitrate, phosphorus, and other contaminants of concern from the dairy wastewater. This helps to protect clean groundwater. Once nitrogen gets into deep groundwater stores, it is extremely difficult to remove it and make that water usable again. And our team has so far been working on improvements to this system and also some new ways to remediate phosphorus from sewage and also dairy wastewaters. And the great thing about resilient strategies like this that use microbes is that you don't have to plug them in. They remove contaminants naturally as they grow, and in the case of algae, using sunlight as their fuel. Another example comes from mobilizing microbial bioremediation on land. And we're working on projects together with ranching communities that help stabilize soil to reduce soil erosion and preserve nutrients in the system, increase water retention so that we don't have to irrigate as much, and also maximize the storage of carbon in soils. These strategies include adding compost to the tops of soils and also restoring surface microbial communities that help bind soils in place and increase water infiltration. Dryland soils alone, and a lot of people don't know this, store 1/3 of the world's soil organic carbon. And this critical carbon sink offers us a deep discount on our anthropogenic carbon emissions, providing a natural solution to climate change. While we typically consider forests as the best terrestrial carbon sinks, and of course our forests in New Mexico are a good example of that, some new data suggests that managed agricultural and rangelands can actually remove substantial CO2 from the atmosphere and may be second only to forests in their potential for carbon storage. But surprisingly little is known about strategies for increasing carbon storage in managed dryland ecosystems. So this provides a great opportunity for New Mexico and the Northern Rio Grande Consortium to lead the way. The last thing I want to mention is that we're discovering new microbes that promote plant growth and productivity under drought and pollution. My group has isolated fungi from the roots of grasses in New Mexico that make plants grow 200% larger when they're stressed out by heat or drought. We're also working with a large UNM-based Superfund team to discover new fungi that can help remediate toxic uranium and arsenic in polluted soils. And these kinds of resilient strategies have high potential to fuel new industries and create jobs, while simultaneously reducing the threat of systems tipping over into thresholds of undesirable states. Ellen, did you want me also to say something about carbon inventory for New Mexico?
Yeah, there had been a couple of questions about that, and just maybe if you could spend a minute or so on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, so we're just getting this process started, working with some people in the state who were part of the climate strategy team to find ways to fund efforts to develop statewide carbon maps. This will help if we go down the road of a carbon economy. And it's also just very useful for thinking about what ecosystems and what lands across the state are storing the most carbon. So it's led by some researchers at UNM and also New Mexico State. And we have 11 eddy covariance flux towers, which are these great pieces of infrastructure that basically monitor how much ecosystems are breathing in and breathing out CO2 on a half-hourly basis. That kind of rich data sets us up for incredible opportunities for detecting the early warning signs of systems tipping. And we already have 11 of these towers in New Mexico, which is pretty amazing. And we'd really like to expand that network to a statewide environmental monitoring platform that will help us to be prepared and detect early warning signals in these systems of impending decline. I don't want to take up too much time, so I'm going to turn it back to Ellen to pose some more questions.
All right. So one of the questions that was in the chat, and I'll just throw this out for the whole panel to respond to: what can different organizations and regions of New Mexico do to get involved with this initiative, the NRGCC, particularly aspects that are pursuing BBB and similar funding opportunities? So how do we see those two things meshing? I'm going to make Luis answer this one then.
Well, we're nascent, and so we're in the process of developing social media communications, including a website, et cetera. In the meantime, I would hope that anybody who's on the call today, if you have an interest in getting involved, that you contact either myself or Roberto, depending on what part of the corridor you're from, or Ellen, or your colleagues at the national labs, And we will be very willing to include you in further communications and potential workshops, et cetera. Like I said, we're at the early stages of this, and we recognize that as the collaborative gets bigger, it's simply going to need to be able to take advantage of all of the capacity throughout the state. So I'm glad that people are interested in getting to be part of this. Roberto, anything to add from your side?
Oh, I think you covered it very well. And the main opportunity is that collectively we can do more. Okay.
Okay. I think there are a couple questions and about how this is really going to impact economy. And one of the questions speaks to renewable energy, which is related to climate change, of course. And the question was, most of the wind turbine and photovoltaic companies are in China and Europe. What is the carrot that could attract those to New Mexico?
I can't answer that from the perspective of economic development because that's not my area of expertise. But I do think we have tremendous educational opportunities and are putting ourselves in a position to create academic programs that are very specific to the kind of workforce needs that these new industries and technologies are going to require. And as long as we persist, all the universities persist in focusing on making that happen, we can make ourselves attractive.
Awesome. Okay. One other question that was in the chat was around controlled environment agriculture recycles almost all of the water it uses and is important for supplying food deserts as well as for feeding astronauts. Are there opportunities to make investments in controlled environment agriculture to grow our economy, like Mason Farms near Hatch, and even protect our forests by growing seedlings for reforestation?
I would have to say, of course, as we have less and less water, that's one of the few options we have left to us.
And after examining the federal reconciliation bill, there's so many articles related to providing funding in those areas, either as a direct grant funding or the loan mechanisms or subsidies for federal lands. Yeah.
Okay. We have about 3 minutes left, and I'm going to just ask each of the panelists. And again, this is an economic development summit for New Mexico. And so if in the last couple minutes, could you each perhaps state in a single word or maybe a short phrase your thoughts about the NRGCC, the Drylands Resilience Project, and specifically with respect to their potential for sustainable economic impact on New Mexico and the surrounding region. So I think I'll start with Michael.
Sure, thank you. So I would say that there's an incredible amount of opportunity here. I think everyone on this phone call probably realizes that. And I think that really at this point, it's a matter of really helping everyone understand what the opportunity really is and what we're trying to get towards in terms of an overall vision. I think Jennifer Rudgers has a lot of great ideas. Look forward to connecting with her a little more about her ideas. But again, from the National Laboratory's perspective, I don't know that we would be, as much a lead in the construction of that vision, but I know that, we are very much looking forward and enthusiastic to contribute technologies where we can.
All right, Roberto.
Thank you, Ellen. I think at the end, the major task everybody faces is about controlling climate change. We gotta slow it down. and not only locally, but also globally. So as well as given the Dryland initiative, I think that is an important aspect. But I believe it's about everybody in the world trying to do similar things to reduce carbon emissions, to be able to slow it down. And education will be a big piece of it, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Luis?
So I think you asked for a little phrase, and you've all heard me say this, and I'm going to add a little bit to it. Together we can grow the pie, and together we can share the wealth. I think as a small state that does not have huge academic institutions, but has incredible wealth in national labs and other, we can, by working together, increase the flow of new potential technologies and IP to this part of the state and create stronger economies, more diverse economies.
All right. And Jen, you'll have the last word on this.
Louise, I couldn't agree with you more. I study mutualisms, and our team had so much fun collaborating across institutions to build up these ideas, and there's so much more work to do. But if I had to put out just 4 words, I would say the time is now. We are at this amazing confluence. We have the New Mexico Water Data Act, collating data from all over the state. We have the 2020 climate strategy. We have film and tourism industries that are really just ramping up and compared to neighboring states, undershooting their potential, and this great opportunity to capitalize on those. And we have these new federal funding initiatives coming down the pipe to specifically target climate research. So I think there could be no better time than right now to invest in this.
All right. Well, thank you all. And I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa. That was great. I appreciate everybody's time and energy this afternoon and for sticking with the summit. And with that, Lisa, it's back to you.